Darkangel by Meredith and Pierce, Chapter 12, Icarus Bride. Ariel finished weaving by late afternoon, a long piece of pale gold cloth, finer and thinner and lighter than breath. And then she took the steps to the gargoyle tower. She knew they could hear her quiet step on the stairs because they had begun to give little moans and yips of anticipation at her approach. And when she emerged onto the circular terrace of the tower, the gargoyles descended from their platforms and strained toward her against their chains. She caressed each of them in turn, patting their rough reptilian hides, ruffling their fish scales or feathers or fur. "Run fast," she told them. "Fly far, far off where we cannot find you if I fail." Then she slipped the pins that held the chains of their collars. The collars themselves would not come free, and set the gargoyles at liberty. Those that could fly staggered into the air and coursed away in odd directions, more rapid than Ariel could have thought possible on their skeletal wings. Those that could not plunged from the tower's top and landed, seemingly without injury, on the grassy plain. Far, far below, they streaked off in opposite directions, wailing a high, keening cry of freedom, like great herons or wild horses or wolves. Then Ariel turned and descended into the castle again to wait. Hours dragged and drifted by. The planet waxed. Solstar sank lower in the ebon sky, and the Darkangel did not return. Ariel fingered the cool step of the stone staircase on which she sat. The air of the stairwell chilled her, felt damp. Her palms prickled with sweat, her mouth tasted of metal, zinc. She found the wait interminable. She dared not seek out the Duro, lest she disturb his final preparations, and she did not believe that at the moment she could bear the company of the wraiths. Her one consolation was that as soon as the vampire returned, she would have a companion. His final bride would join their plan, and then she, Ariel, would not be so alone. She watched the sun decline through the wide casement by which she sat, licked her dry lips, and whistled Ma'am-Bai's, and whistled the Ma'am-Bai walking tune softly to keep her courage up. At last, when the sun was low, barely an hour from setting, the Darkangel came, whirling out of the west in a tangled fury of wings. Ariel sprang up and ran to the tower, but he was already coming down the steps when she arrived, limping, favoring the foot he had burned in the water of the cave. Many day months passed. Ariel stood on the inside steps of the tower, looking up as he descended. His broken wings still hung askew. He spotted her, but did not stop, came toward her. His face was tight, his lips pressed thin. He was alone. "There you are," he said shortly. His tone was brittle. "I feared I might have to search the keep for you. Is the weaving done?" "Yes," she said, falling back a step for sheer astonishment. "Quite done, but—" "But where is my bride?" he finished for her, clenching and unclenching his fists as he came down. "I could not find one, but no matter." At last he growled. He swept past her on the steps and continued down, still limping. Ariel hung back a moment, then followed. "That is not to say there was not many a maid I could have plucked away with ease," he snapped. "But they were all so ugly. I think they are hiding the pretty ones from me." He ground his teeth. "I shall make them pay for that when I am made full Icarus and rule. They shall give up their pretty ones to me in plenty then." Ariel started after him, bewildered. She had never before heard such a torrent of words from him. "But as it was," he continued, ill-tempered yet, but no longer raging, "there seemed to be no maidens much prettier than you, and as my wings were beginning to tire, the one being broken puts a strain upon the rest, I decided not to bother bringing one back, when I already had a maid here who would serve well enough." "What?" Ariel exclaimed. She could not believe she had heard him right. What did he mean? She let out her breath suddenly. Surely he could not mean her. Apprehension took her by the throat. The vampire continued, taking no notice that she did not call him my lord any more. Indeed, he seemed almost mollified by her dismay. "You are not as pretty as some of my wives have been," he remarked, shrugging. "But you will do." Ariel halted on the steps and stared at him. Her chest grew now so tight it hurt. I don't understand, she heard herself saying. The echoes whispered back at her like bats' wings in the tower. She shook her head once, though silently, desperately. No, surely he is but baiting me again. The Icarus snorted, glanced at her over his black feathered shoulder. Have I not made myself abundantly plain? You are to wear the bridal gown. Yes, you. He paused and stood a moment, half turned, toying with his leaden chain. He gave her a mocking smile. She was not sure whether the mockery in it was meant for her or for himself. Are you not honored? Ariel stood dumb. He eyed her and then nodded to himself, as though the prospect of wiving her did not displease him as much as he had thought. Go, prepare yourself, he told her, and I shall do the same. You know where my chambers are. I shall leave them unlocked. Be there just at sunset, and I shall come to you. Ariel said nothing, nor moved. By the way, he remarked almost casually. Her horror seemed to have restored his humor. Where are my gargoyles? They are not up above. Ariel nodded. It was a long moment before she could speak. I know. I've set them free. The Icarus turned on her suddenly. Freed them? He spat. All trace of amusement washed from him. His ice eyes flashed. For that second time since her return, Ariel feared he might forget his word, spring upon her there and throttle her, but he restrained himself barely. His cold, white eyes never left his face. No matter, he murmured. His breath was harsh. I shall need no more watchdogs after tonight. He fiddled with the chain about his neck. It is well you are to be my wife, girl, he breathed thickly, or I should be displeased. Abruptly he swung away from Ariel, put his back toward, started once more down the turning stair. His black wings rustled like storm wind through the high grass. Reaching the bottom step, he swept out of the tower with never a backward glance. Ariel felt dizzy. She sat down upon the deserted stair. Her heart was beating very hard in the tightness of her throat. She could not think. She had expected an ally. No more than a frightened girl, perhaps, but some helpmate. Thought of the task ahead almost overwhelmed her. Now it fell upon her alone. She felt crushed, breathless. But she made herself take breath. Her knees were weak, but she forced herself to rise. The Duro was waiting for her. The wraiths depended on her, and her own life hung on this now as well. A kind of calm stole over her. More numbness, she thought dimly, than calm. Slowly she went down the stairs, going out into the garden then. She followed the long steps into the caves. And we will pause there.